It's been a lovely week and we've had some amazing sunsets, but I've been really busy and just haven't had time to get out and do anything about it. This evening I thought, because it's Friday evening and I finished work, I might pop down to somewhere like, say, Llyn Island or something. But I happen to know there's a couple of workshops going on there this weekend, so it's going to be absolute pandemonium. There'll be shoulder to shoulder, tripods in a row. Frankly, there might even be scuffles. So Church in the Sea, well, that's going to be busy as well. So I thought I'll pop down to the lake, find a composition, and we'll just do a really quick impromptu workshop where I show you how to shoot a sunset. There's no clouds in the sky whatsoever, so this is all going to be about atmosphere and colour. Okay, so we're all set up. Let me explain to you what I've been up to. I've got about 45 minutes to go before sunset, and I've got two specific images in mind. One with the sun right on the horizon and maybe some starburst effect, something like that. And then a later one, probably much later, even as much as 30 to 45 minutes after sunset, with the colour in the sky. Previous evenings we've had some lovely high wispy clouds that have lit up beautifully. I don't think we're going to get that today, but nevertheless, it's the middle of September and I'm wearing a t-shirt, so who cares? Now, this particular spot in front of my house, it's all very well, it's scenic and all that sort of thing, but photographically it's not brilliant. So we've got to work at our composition. Let's give some thought to how we might set ourselves up. Well, we haven't got much in the way of foreground, but we really need that to make this interesting, because without any foreground, some nice colour in the sky is going to be kind of irrelevant. So what can we do? Well, there's a couple of boulders and an old gnarly fence post. We can make use of those. And what I've done is I've set the fence post up on the left-hand third. And I've got just a couple of feet of grass in front of the camera in shot. Whether I'll leave it in or crop it out remains to be seen. But by shooting at 12mm, it means that I've got that to play with later on, so I can make a decision when I see how it looks. Now, it would be kind of tempting to say, hey, let's get down really low and get right in front of these boulders and go for the dramatic wide angle. The problem with that, of course, is you're not going to be able to see much water. When you get down low, you're just going to have a little slice of water. And this image is really made by the fact I've kind of got this inlet that's got reed beds on either side of it. So I'm taking advantage of that interesting shape of the water coming into the bottom half of the frame to give me some mid-ground interest. So I've got the camera down relatively low, but not right down really low. I've got the leg splayed because I'm parked on a load of grass. It's not very stable. And for that reason, I'll also be using a wireless remote shutter, because when I start capturing exposures, I don't want to be touching it at all. Now, I've got aperture dialed in f5.6, which, as you know, if you follow my channel, I bang on about it, the sweet spot of the lens. But it's an important point. When you find out where the sweet spot is on your lenses, you're always best off trying to use that, because that's going to give you the best results. So why wouldn't you if you can? What that does for me is it does give me quite a good depth of field. So by focusing about a third of the way into the frame, I don't expect to have any problems at all. So I'm pre-focused and I won't be touching that again for the rest of the evening, because I won't be changing my composition. Frankly, there isn't a better composition to be had anywhere around here. And I've shot here enough to know that. So what we're doing now is we're just waiting for the light. We're all set up. Once the light starts to show any interest, we'll start taking exposures. Now, there's just one last thing I did want to show you. There's a crappy old mooring point just out on the end of the reed bed where I park my fishing boat sometimes. I tie it up there to save me dragging it onto the mud. It's plug ugly and ruins all of my shots. What I've done with this, by angling myself exactly right, I've got this fence post completely hiding it. Now, I could clone it out in post, but it is a bit of a faff. So this saves that. But there's a tip for you in terms of composition. You know, sometimes you might have something ugly in the scene. If you can get something in the foreground to mask it, you can save yourself a lot of grief in post. Okay, so ready to go. Okay, so I didn't really mention much about exposure earlier on, and the reason for that is we can't really get to grips with it until we know what the light is going to be. Earlier on, when I was sorting out my composition, what I did was I had my screen heavily overexposed, and the reason for that is my foreground, looking straight into the sun, was pure black. I couldn't see a thing through the camera. So by ignoring the fact you're blowing out the highlights, crank your exposure right up. It allows you to see what's going on in the foreground and set your composition. So now we're getting towards the point at which we're going to start shooting. So what I've done is I've got my filter holder set up, and I've currently got a 0.9 soft grad filter in. I don't think that I'm going to be using a 10 stop or anything like that in terms of smoothing out the water, because it's absolutely flat calm. And also, even though there's hardly any breeze, I haven't got a wind muff on my microphone, the reeds in front of me are moving about just a little bit, and as the light drops and the shutter speed gets out to say quarter or half a second, they're going to be moving about a little bit too much. I do want them to be sharp in the image, so we'll see what we have to do to compensate for that to get a fast enough shutter speed. But there's no ripple on the water, so at the moment no need for a 10 stop or anything like that. Okay, so I've started shooting when the sun is still pretty yellow, hasn't gone red yet, and it's still got a good 5 or 10 minutes to go before it actually hits the horizon. The horizon is pretty low round here. It's quite flat on Anglesey on this side of the island. But what I'm particularly doing here is getting all this vegetation in my foreground nicely backlit, so I don't care that the highlights in the water and the sky are completely blown out. It's important to remember with this sort of photography that I'm not just taking a single exposure. My final images are both going to be a combination of multiple exposures. So right now I'm just getting my foreground on the SD card. I really do like this kind of photography because it's slow and relaxed, no stress, no pressure whatsoever. And most importantly for me is it gives you the time to actually enjoy the spectacle, to enjoy your surroundings. When I was at Niagara recently, I came away from it, and a couple of days later when I looked back on it, I thought I was so focused on getting my images, I didn't really just sit there and soak it all in. And the next phase of exposures I'm going to be taking are going to be very much for the line of light that comes across the lake. And I've positioned myself so that the sun will set immediately between these two reed beds. That was a very specific piece of positioning, apart from obviously trying to mask out my mooring point. But I knew exactly where the sun was going to set, and I wanted the line of light to run down through the water, not being interfered with by the reed beds, and it looks like I've got it just right. Well, we're getting to the sharp end now, probably only about 2 minutes to go, and I can now look straight into it without squinting too badly. Now, one thing to bear in mind about blending exposures, you do need to be careful. If you have a really dark foreground and a really light background, and this is probably the extreme, no cloud whatsoever, the sun setting straight down the barrel of the lens. The problem you have if you're not careful, if you take an exposure for the foreground that's too bright and you darken it down too much for the background to control the highlights, if those exposures are too far apart, it's really difficult to blend them convincingly and make it look like it was a single scene. So my recommendation is, if you can, take a series and then you can pick the best one, because it's very difficult to know when you're outside, you've got your camera on the tripod and you're looking on the screen, which one could be a winner. So don't chance it. take a range of exposures, and then you've got something to play with. But don't take them too far apart. So what I would be doing is literally just dial in a couple of adjustments like this, take a shot, couple more, just bring it out a little bit more, take another shot, and that's going to give me everything I need to work with in post. I can find the one with the optimum color for the background, and I've already got my foregrounds in the bag. I'm willing to bet it's going to be all over in about 10 minutes, and there won't be a second image, I shouldn't think. I really should have come out last night when the sky was radioactive. Well, that fizzled out pretty quickly, unfortunately. Certainly no chance of a second image with some colour in the sky, because after about 10 minutes there wasn't any. So time to head home. But the fun doesn't end there, of course. We've now got to do a bit of exposure blending. And if that's something you might find useful, let me know in the comments, and I'll quite happily make a post-processing video about how I put the final image together. Now, as sunsets go, it's not going to be a competition winner, but that's not entirely the point. The object of the exercise was A, for me to get some practice, and B, for perhaps me to share some tips with you. If that's something that you might have found useful, then it'll have been worthwhile. So, despite the fact it's not the best image in the world, I'll pop it up for you to take a look at. But in the meantime, thank you ever so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Join me next time. I don't know where I'm going to be, but hopefully it'll be somewhere slightly more interesting. Thank you ever so much. And if you haven't done it yet, why not subscribe now and join me next time. Cheers.